Hello, good evening, and thank you for coming to the Glendale-River Hills Community Referendum Information Session. This evening, we're going to talk a little bit about what has happened in our district, how we are responding, what our needs are, and what does that mean for our district as we move forward. A key area that I would like to start with this evening is to give a little background on state funding for education in the state of Wisconsin. The following video I'm going to share with you is going to kind of demonstrate sort of how that funding model works. In the Glendale-River Hills School District, we receive the largest portion of our revenue from our taxpayers. Because we're considered to be a property-rich district, we do not get much in state funding. There's a portion of this video that is going to show basically two pitchers being poured into a glass, and they show them at equal levels of state funding and equal levels of property tax funding. That balance in the Glendale-River Hills School District does not equate that sort of equalized area. We receive a higher level of funding from our taxpayers and a much lower level than state funding. So I'm going to play this video and give you an opportunity to learn a little bit more about state funding and how that might be impacting our local district.
Our public schools are the cornerstone of our community. The education and opportunities we provide for students today shape their futures and ours. Schools, like any organization, need money to operate. But in Wisconsin, funding the needs of our schools has been a growing challenge. State policy limits how much school districts can spend. The vast majority of school funding comes from a combination of state dollars and local property taxes. It's called the revenue limit, and it acts as a cap per student that school districts can spend each year. Even if school costs go above this level, schools can't spend any more than this limit. From 1994 to 2009, these revenue caps were adjusted for inflation, which meant they helped schools keep up with ongoing needs. But since 2010, the resources districts need to survive have fallen farther and farther behind the basic costs to operate our schools. By the end of 2025, the revenue limit will have fallen more than $3,300 per student behind inflation. With a district of 1,000 students, that's a decrease of more than $3 million. What's more, each district has a different revenue cap, and these caps are not tied to the needs of the students or the costs to the schools that serve them. Our job as a school district is to make sure all of our students have access to the exceptional educational opportunities we provide, no matter what their needs when they walk through our doors. But state funding falls short of what it costs to meet the specific needs of many of our students. When that happens, we have to use money from our general fund to cover the difference, which means taking dollars from other important needs. The largest portion of our budget goes towards staffing. Our people are the heart of our schools. Without enough educators who instruct, support, and inspire learning, schools can't provide the lessons, programs, and opportunities our students deserve. Other important budget items include curriculum, technology, transportation, operations, and maintenance. School districts work hard to balance their budgets, yet resources for schools have been shrinking year after year since 2010. With costs growing so much faster than funding, districts are always looking for ways to trim costs and work smarter, like deferring needed school maintenance, cutting programs, reducing staff, and many other strategies. But schools can only cut so much before they start to harm educational opportunities for their students. To maintain class sizes, keep up with rising costs, take care of school buildings, and protect high-quality instruction, many districts have turned to their community to help fill the state-imposed funding gap. Since the arrival of revenue limits, over 80% of school districts have done so by asking local voters to raise their caps through an operating referendum. Most have used the option multiple times. Our children don't have time to wait for state policymakers to fix the school funding system. By putting the needs of our students first, we are investing in their potential and the future of our whole community. Strong schools make strong communities where families want to move and stay. Learn more about school finance in Wisconsin by visiting our websites.
So I hope that video provided some context for you around state funding in Wisconsin. One of the things that is a key area is to look at that inflationary growth that's happened without the increase in state funding to meet that match. Apologies, need to start that over again. One of the key things that I want to illustrate is that the example that they provide in this video demonstrates that in a school district of approximately 1,000 students, you would be looking at about a $3 million difference. That is about the size of the Glendale-River Hills School District. So if you take a look at that, you can see down here in 2012, 2013, how the funding from the state has not kept pace with inflation. That has caused significant issues in many districts around the state, which is why you see so many states going to, or so many school districts around our state going to referendum. We have tried to stave that off in the Glendale-River Hills School District through the passage of a few operational referendums throughout the years. Our last one will be falling off as of this school year. And so what we're seeing is sort of this divide and this gap that is unable to be closed in terms of funding without going to our local property owners to ask for those taxes to support that work. So as we're taking a look at that, one of the key things that I do want to point out and have everyone have an opportunity to think about is sort of this idea around our state funding. So our state funding has not been able to keep pace with inflation. And that is causing some of the significant challenges within the Glendale-River Hills School District. Additionally, open enrollment out of the Glendale-River Hills School District through voucher and independent charter school increases have totaled $356,399 over a 2-year period. So as we look at levying our taxpayers and taking money into our schools, some of that money that we take from taxpayers to help cover the costs of education go back directly to private and voucher schools and to the amount that is shown here. Additionally, we've had several unfunded mandates, the most recent being Act 20, in which we need to meet educational needs and mandates from the state around our educational services. However, that has not come with funding, so it falls on the local district to fund those initiatives. Our school district receives between 5 and 6% of state funding in comparison to other districts around the state. And part of that is due to the fact that Glendale-River Hills is seen as a property-rich district in which we would go to our taxpayers to help support our schools. We've also seen an increase in special education costs of over $940,000 over a 2-year period. Since the pandemic, we've seen a strong rise in the referral of students for special education and special education needs. And to address those needs, which are federally and state mandated needs of students once they qualify for an IEP, we have needed to make sure that we have staff in place and resources in place to ensure the highest level of education for those students. We also have increased our staff pay to rise with inflation so that we can attract and retain quality staff to work with our students. And that has led to an increase of $956,653 over a 2-year period in staff increases. So we know that some of these are the larger issues around, how school budgets grow, how inflation impacts those pieces, how state funding impacts those pieces. And those are a part of the Glendale-River Hills story, but they're not the full story. And we want to make sure that we are being transparent and clear with our community around some of those accounting issues that transpired that are specific to the Glendale-River Hills School District. First and foremost, last January, the school board learned and our community learned about failed accounting practices, which were specifically attributed to not reconciling expenses in a timely manner, and that contributed to the overspending and depletion of a $4.3 million fund balance. So our previous business manager did not have the oversight to determine how much money we were situated with through the lack of reconciliation, which then led to that level of overspending. Our financial experts that we hired to come in, our auditors and our internal staff determined that the expenditures were investments to enhance district operations and educational services. And what is meant by that is we needed to hire staff to respond to student need. We needed to have resources in order to respond to student need. We had general maintenance in our buildings that came up that needed to be tended to make our buildings fit for our students and safe. And so those are some of the things that, as we're looking at those costs, when you're not having a clear picture of what your bottom line is at all times, over expenditure was taking place. However, it was very clear from all of these outside sources, our auditors, our financial experts, and our internal staff, that there is truly no evidence of fraud or embezzlement or misuse of that money. So how are we responding to this? We have an issue with state funding, and we also have an extreme issue with our practices at Glendale-River Hills. And we are coming to our community asking for a referendum, and we want to ensure that there is transparency around the steps that have been taken to ensure that we are in a good place moving forward. I started as the interim superintendent in July 1 of this year. Last school year in the spring, the school board asked me to step up. I was serving as the principal of Glen Hills, so I have both familiarity with our district, familiarity with our staff, and a strong understanding of the needs of the district going forward. So some of the things that we did in spring as we entered into this place and we had this transition in leadership was we reduced approximately $1 million through reduction of staff and positions for the 24-25 school year. We truly sought in this process to look for where we had retirements, how we could reshift people who are either retiring or people who are leaving on from our district to not either fill those positions or to move current staff into those positions. We did have to cut close to 11 positions out of our school operations this year. This has meant that during the school year, the load has been carried by all of the staff within our district. Our instructional coaches and interventionists are now supporting students through intervention. They're supporting teachers. They're teaching classes. Our student services staff have had reductions in that area. They're supporting students and making sure that all of those needs are met with less help. In addition to that, we reduced the office staff, so the administrative team within the district office has taken on more responsibility in terms of data collection and system management and ensuring that reports are filed in a timely way. All of us within the organization have pitched in to make this year work with that reduction in staff so that we could begin to do the work of writing our fiscal input. In addition to that, we froze the salaries of our staff this school year as we assessed our fiscal status. We deferred technology supply and curriculum costs. We found ways to reduce some of our technology within our schools in terms of programs and software. In addition to that, we limited teacher supply costs this year. And also looked at some of those curricular programming pieces that we had put into place, specifically after the pandemic. We had some math programming that helped support students in remediating math need. We pulled those services and those curriculum components back to help as a cost-saving measure. We also worked very closely, myself and the board, with updating all of the fiscal policies to ensure that there was stronger oversight through clear monthly spending and expenditure reports. This process makes sure that the reconciliation of revenues and expenditures on a monthly basis is coming forward to the board, and that there are multiple levels and eyes on that work so that we can ensure that that work is happening in a timely way and we have a clear picture of where we stand financially each month. We developed processes for purchasing in our school district. One of the first things that we did towards the end of the school year is really to start to take a look at those processes. We welcomed in Michelle Brown to our business office. She is our new Director of Business Services. And she has worked clearly on putting processes together for purchasing that run through Skyward, which is our software system that talks directly to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. So that is where our reports and financial information run through. So all of our purchases are logged through that area. They go through multiple levels of approval to ensure that there is not over expenditure and that we are keeping track of where those funds and those purchases are going and coming. Additionally, we identified opportunities for increased revenue investment and ensuring that we are planning fiscally for a responsible future. Some of the pieces that Michelle Brown was able to do as she came in as our new Director of Business Services is to identify ways in which we can increase our student count by raising the FTE or full-time equivalency of our K-4 students through some of the programs and offerings that happen at Parkway for Families. This helps generate additional revenue to our district. She's looked at how we can look at continued investment to help grow. And this also has included an examination of what our options are with the Good Hope property. We currently have 3 buildings in our district: Parkway Elementary, Glen Hills Middle School, and Good Hope School. Good Hope is currently not used for educational purposes. There is a childcare center and a Orthodox Jewish school that is operated out of that space, as well as a bridge group and a dance group. And so that space is rented right now to try to remain cost neutral. However, there are many repairs that need to be done to that building. So as a board, the board has charged both myself and Michelle to look at what are some of those options for that building, and so that we can begin to think about how we plan for the future and make wise decisions around our footprint within the community and how we can sustain ourselves, knowing that the changes to state funding likely are not coming, and we have needs within our own school district and our own buildings to help support how we will move forward. But wanting to make that decision with thought and foresight and know the legacy that that leaves within our community. Additionally, as I mentioned, we have a new Director of Business Operations. We have a new district accountant, an accounting assistant, and a payroll and benefits specialist in our district. This business office under new leadership has improved systems and has addressed issues of internal control to make sure that we are in a good place moving forward. And finally, our board adopted a resolution to go to referendum to help support our needs over the next 2 years, to be able to demonstrate to the community our fiscal responsibility as well as accountability around our educational practices before coming to the community and looking at how we might plan for the future of our schools. So the question being asked is, shall the Glendale-River Hills School District, Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, be authorized to exceed the revenue limit specified in Section 121.91 Wisconsin statutes by $4.5 million for a year for 2 years for the 24-25 school year and the 25-26 school year for non-recurring purposes consisting of operational expenses to maintain district programs? We are truly looking at maintenance. In January of 2024, the board and the community were apprised to the accounting errors that took place in our district. This required us to then take a look at our fiscal landscape and to really truly understand where we were at. We worked closely with Baird to help support that through some financial forecasting. So at this time, January through May, you can see that this was the way that we were looking at finances. If we were looking at this current school year, coming into this current school year, had we not acted prior to the start of this school year to secure a Wisconsin State Trust loan, we would have been in a situation where we would have been looking at a $4 million deficit walking into this school year. We know that we would not have been able to run our schools, even with this nearly 4% decrease in expenditures and salaries that we made through the cuts to staff. As we looked into the following year of 25-26, we noticed that we would be looking at close to a $9 million deficit, and that would just continue to grow exponentially over the next few years. The board knew that they had to take action. So what the board did is secured a $6 million trust fund loan. And so this is what our current picture looks like. So as we began to consider the need to go to referendum, we had to look at, okay, we've been able to take out this trust loan, which has allowed us to stabilize going into the 24-25 school year with reductions in staff. However, we know what this is going to mean in subsequent years, and we know that we need to pay back that money with interest, right? So we're looking at what can we do to help support us over the next 2 years to demonstrate to the community that we can manage the money that is coming into the district in a way to serve our students without causing a reduction in programming and services to our children, as we know that we're preparing them for Nicolet High School, which is one of the most competitive high schools in the state of Wisconsin. So we took a look at this, and what we see is we're walking into this school year with a $3 million surplus. That surplus is in place because of that $6 million trust loan. Additionally, you'll note that the non-recurring referendum that was taken out 5 years ago, we are in the last year of that. So we also have an additional 1.5 that we had levied 5 years ago that is still sitting on our books essentially, which is allowing us to be in a positive space this year. Moving into next school year, you can see that that significantly dips, and we are looking at close to a 4.7 or close to a $5 million deficit in 25-26. Looking at these numbers, understanding that that negative fund balance provides us absolutely no cushion and would put us in a place of needing to make deep and significant cuts, the board made the decision unanimously to move towards the $4.5 million referendum per year for 2 years to steady our ship, to get us in a place where we can continue to reassess where we are financially so we can engage the community and understand what our needs are moving forward so that we can make those sound decisions, knowing what our revenues are, knowing what our expenditures are, and how we may need to adjust going forward. So this is with the trust loan in place, and this is what it would look like with a $4.5 million 2-year referendum. What you can see is going into this school year, we would maintain a surplus of $7.9 million approximately. We would have a fund balance, and we would see that increase of the non-recurring referendum down here with that 4.5. So it would be added to the 1.5. This would provide us with a very healthy cushion for this current school year. This may make you wonder, so why this school year? Why not wait until next? Part of the reason is that if we go back and you take a look at that other slide, we would be then walking into this next school year with a $4 million deficit, which would require us to cut nearly $3 million in staffing and programming for our students. With $4.5 million this year, Next year, we would still be in a position of having to look for some efficiencies because we would still be coming into the 25-26 school year at a $248,000 deficit. And so the ask of 4.5 million was decided upon because it provides us with just enough to steady the ship. And when we sent out our survey last spring, we put it out there for 5 million and the community came back and said no. So we wanted to make sure we were listening, trying to reduce the expenditure to the community as much as possible, and reduce that ask as much as possible. So what this referendum would really do is provide us 2 years to begin to engage again and think about what that future looks like. If needed, we could then make cuts into 26, 27, or we could be looking at going to a more comprehensive referendum for a longer period of time with more information, better input, exploration of both our assets and liabilities to think about how we can move forward for the future. So what would it cost? If the $4.5 million referendum were to go through, you would be looking at about $19.33 per $200,000 home value per month. You would also notice that if your home was in the $400,000 range, you'd be looking at a yearly $464 increase. And then you see a $600,000 home as a $696 increase per year. Please note that these numbers are preliminary numbers. They can be changed and probably have shifted slightly based on some of the equalized value that has been released late in October, or excuse me, early in October. So what happens if the referendum fails? Despite the spending cuts that were made this past school year, the district will be facing a deficit of over $3 million in the 25-26 school year, and they will need to make approximately $3 million in cuts for that school year. This means that in April of this next school year in 2025, we would be in a position of having to issue our staff preliminary non-renewal notices and begin to start to look at how we can tailor back and cut programming within our schools. This will likely include significant staff cuts and salary freezes for our staff, cuts to our allied arts and other programs such as music, gifted and talented, tech ed, STEAM, and world language. It would mean increased fees for our families, increased class sizes for our students, and cuts to the student support team, such as counselors, psychologists, and school social workers, which would mean that we would have fewer mental health and social emotional learning supports for our students within our schools. There would be reduced access to technology for students and reduced access to various curriculum resources. We would also seek to defer any maintenance on our buildings or make any repairs that weren't absolutely necessary in order to be able to move through the 25-26 school year. So again, that investment of approximately $19.33 per $200,000 house would be the difference between us having to cut many of the programs that make our school district unique and help prepare our students for Nicolet. It would lead to the increased class sizes, particularly at Parkway Elementary, where we know that having those smaller class sizes for our students does make a difference in learning in those early years. So if the referendum succeeds, we will be able to maintain our student to teacher ratios over the next 2 years. We would be able to maintain our programming in music, such as band, choir, and orchestra at the middle school level. We would maintain our science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEAM programming, technical education, world languages, and talent development. Additionally, our student support team would be able to continue to deliver strong mental health and learning, social emotional learning supports for our students. Our reading and math interventionists would be able to support our students who have reading and literacy needs, as well as supporting teachers in their success in working with those students. Salaries would be able to see a slight increase, would be building in approximately a 2% increase in salaries to help retain our high quality staff in our district. We would be able to perform those necessary maintenance needs on our school buildings and our grounds. And we would be able to maintain our current levels of technology and curriculum materials for instruction. So the goal in maintaining those pieces over the next 2 years is really to start to think about how we begin to move forward. And part of moving forward is having a clear plan. Last school year, our school board members, our leadership team, our teachers, community members, and other staff members were part of a strategic planning process in which they outlined the vision and mission for our school district, as well as focusing on our district pillars of whole child growth and success, an empowered community, exceptional staff and exceptional leadership, and equitable stewardship. We are in our first year of aligning our practices and our work to that strategic plan to help support and build the growth of our schools. Part of that strategic plan is having a way to show accountability to our school community, a direction to our school community, and so that you know where we're going and whether or not we're meeting that mark. Part of the accountability and transparency with the community would be looking at scorecard metrics that we would be gathering baseline information on this school year. Those metrics would include, in the areas of whole child growth and development, a student life at school score, which would help monitor students' sense of belonging and acceptance at school. We would be looking at early literacy achievement scores at the elementary level to determine how well we are growing our students in those important early literacy practices that lay the foundation for later learning. We would be looking at math and literacy achievement for grades 3 through 8. How well are our students achieving? And we would also be looking at gap closure reporting. So when we look at our subgroups, are we growing our subgroups? Are we meeting the needs of all students within our educational system? And are we able to close those gaps? In our empowered community, we would be looking at a community and family engagement survey to gauge both how our community and those families who are tightly connected to our community are feeling about the way that our schools are running. We would be looking at both the identification, excuse me, and communication of our partnerships within the community. Exceptional staff and exceptional leadership. We would be looking at our staff retention rate. We know how important it is to develop staff, and staff are well developed and understand the curriculum that they teach when they have longevity in a district. We know that that matters. We also know that the consistency for students is very important. So looking at how we retain our staff in our district. In addition to that, we would be looking at a staff engagement score, which would be able to provide us with a sense of how our staff are feeling around the purpose of their work and the accomplishment of their work. In addition to that, we would be looking at equitable stewardship by having markers to determine our fund balance percentage and how we would have plans and opportunities to build back that fund balance, and to get stakeholder input on a balanced budget. So recognizing and keeping track of how we are involving stakeholders on those budget issues. And then also our 10-year capital and maintenance plan. What are our future plans for our buildings to maintain them, to upgrade them, and to think about our footprint and how we can serve students in our community in a way that is not only fiscally responsible, but manageable for subsequent years. So the goal of our work would be to plan for the future together, to begin to engage community members into thinking about all of the aspects of our educational programming to ensure that we have a future in which families are seeking to move to Glen Hills and to Glendale-River Hills to support their students growing and learning so that Parkway Elementary and Glen Hills Middle Schools continue a legacy and tradition of preparing students to go to the Nicolay High School and perform well and achieve great things in life. We know that these early years of education are incredibly important, and we want to ensure that we are recalibrating over the next 2 years with some transparency and accountability to our community so that we can work together to plan for our future. I would encourage all of you to make sure that you vote. Please feel free to use the QR code to go to myvotewisconsin.gov. Make sure you're registered and have a plan to vote on Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. And I'd like to thank you. Thank you for your interest in our schools, for supporting our students, for being curious and engaged citizens. If I can support any additional questions you may have, please feel free to reach out to Anna Young. I am the interim superintendent. I can be reached at 414-351-7170, extension 2103, or you can reach me at anna.young@gdrh.org. Thank you again for listening to the presentation, and we look forward to seeing you at the polls and in our schools.